Hello, thanks for watching Super 3 Boy's second Blender tutorial. This is part of a series of tutorials that I am making. You can go to Nistic.com to download these tutorials and find answers to any of your questions. Let's begin. Let's start first by opening up Blender. This tutorial is aimed to teach you how to add and use the many pre-modeled shapes and objects that Blender has. In the previous tutorial, we made a man out of cubes. Now, let me make this here now again by going into front view. And remember, we can make objects smaller by hitting the S key and dragging inward, hitting Shift D to duplicate to make the legs, and remember the grab tool is automatically selected. Hit Shift D again. You can follow along if you'd like. Make it bigger by hitting the S key and dragging outward. And I'll hit Shift D again. Hit the S key, drag inward, make it smaller. Shift D, drag it over to the other side. Shift D one more time to make the head. Now, as you remember from the last tutorial, we could hold down Alt and click our left mouse button to do a free rotate. I'm going to do this now. As you can see, it's a bunch of cubes. Now, Blender comes with many pre-modeled shapes and objects, such as cubes, as you can see here. We have circles and UV spheres and all that kind of stuff. I'll show you that right now. Let me go back into front view. Now that we're done with this man, let's go back to the default cube we saw when we opened Blender. I'm going to scroll to the top left corner, hit File, and you can see New. This goes back to the default cube and creates a new file. You can also see that you can hit Control X to do the same function. And you just click your left mouse button to say yes, you want to erase all. So here we have it, our default cube. Now that we're at our default cube, let's hit the S key, drag inward, and make the cube a little smaller. Now I'm going to show you a menu that we're going to use throughout the tutorial. It's the spacebar. You just hit spacebar and it opens this menu. You see Add, Edit, Select, Transform, Object, View, Render. We'll get into all of this. First, we're just going to go to Add. Now, if I scroll over one, I see Mesh, and I see a bunch of shape names. Plane, Cube, Circle, UV sphere, icosphere, cylinder, tube, cone, grid, and monkey. Let's start first by clicking on plane with your left mouse button. This opens up a plane in the 3D space. By hitting Alt, you can see that this plane is flat, and right now it's in the middle of the cube. So let's hit the G key like we learned earlier in the other tutorial and move this over a bit. Let's also size that down. And we can move it back a little bit more towards the cube. So we have 2 objects now. Now if you see these little dots on the side of your plane, just hit tab. I'll explain more about that later. So let's go back to top view, which is by default selected. And you see this cursor, this red and white cursor right over here? That dictates where the objects are going to be placed. So let's left click our mouse button over more to the left here and add another object. Now let's add some more objects to the 3D space. Hit spacebar again, scroll over to mesh. Now by default when we open Blender we already have a cube in there, so let's scroll down to a circle, and by default it's say vertices 32, and if it doesn't say that, you can click the right arrow to make it bigger or the left arrow to make it smaller, and we just want that set at 32 and hit OK. This creates a circle. You can make this smaller like we did our plane and our cube. And let's see what this looks like by hitting the Alt key. As you can see, we have a little circle, cube, and a plane. Now we see those little yellow dots around the circle, so let's just hit tab. So now you can see this little those objects. Now move your cursor over here and click. Let's add another object. Hit spacebar, mesh. Oops. Keep on scrolling out. Okay, I got it now. And scroll down to UV sphere. Click on that. It should say segments 32. Remember, you can, if it doesn't, just scroll up or down until you get segments 32. Hit OK. And rings 32. Make that 32 if it's not already. Then hit OK again. So now you have this object, a sphere. Has those dots on it. So just hit tab on your keyboard. Scale it down like the rest of the objects. So right now, we have a plane, a cube, a circle, and a sphere. Now go back to top view and move your red and white cursor over here by just clicking your left mouse button. And let's add a couple more objects. Hit add, mesh, icosphere, subdivisions, make it 2 if it's not already. Scroll over to OK. Now we have an icosphere. Sort of resembles a sphere over here, but this one is smoother. This one. Go back to top view again. And this can be our last object. Scroll over. Go to cylinder. Hit vertices 32. Scale it down with the S key. Move it. We have those dots on it, so hit tab. So now by doing a free rotate with Alt, we can see our 6 objects. We have a plane. We have a cube. We have a circle. We have a sphere. We have something that looks like a sphere. And a cylinder. Go back to top view again. now we have our 6 objects in the 3D space. Let's do something a little different. Scroll down to View. Open up that menu. As you can see on the right side, there are shortcuts. I've used the top view shortcuts a couple of times by hitting numpad 7. Remember, you have to have numlock on. And let's scroll down to camera and click, or you can just hit its shortcut numpad 0. Now here you can see our objects from a different view. These lines right here are the boundaries of what this camera can see. Now, the purpose of Blender is to make virtual scenes or virtual pictures. Now, we do this by rendering. What's called rendering. It adds the objects here plus lighting. As you can see, the little reflections of light on the objects, especially the sphere right here. And it sets a location from where it sees this all at. Now, go up to top left and hit render current frame. You can also use F12. Now it pops up this window. You can see here. It's called Blender Render. Sort of rhymes. And you can see our objects here. You can see our cube, our plane, our cylinder, our sphere, and our other sphere. But missing the circle. That's because it doesn't have a thing called a face. So it doesn't have this little gray area right here. It's just a bunch of points. So we don't see anything right now. You can see the light coming off the sphere right here, well, right here. You can see the shadows too. So this is the final product. This is the most important feature right here of Blender, the render feature, where we add everything. Now, if you go back here to our Blender window, instead of our render, just click on top bar. You can see these lines right here in relation to what the camera sees. Notice the amount of space between here and here. Just about the same. So you can see these are the edges of the camera. All along here. Outer line. It's the edge of the camera. What the computer sees and adds lighting to. And all the objects and everything. So let's go back to top view and add a